Hello, and welcome to a not so new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Today is a repeat episode. So, if you have listened to every episode of Set Lusting Bruce, you probably want to skip this one, though I appreciate you downloading it because my numbers need it. But way back on September 8th, 2015, the first episode of Set Lusting Bruce was released on the Southgate Media Network. I had been doing some other podcasts for Southgate Media, and I had asked Rob, the owner, if he would mind if I did a Springsteen podcast. He said yes, and he was nice enough to actually interview me for the first episode. So, what I'm going to do, and I do this every year, is in honor of that anniversary, here is the very first episode of Set Lusting Bruce. There is a lot in this first episode that shows where we wanted to go and what we wanted to do. I don't know. I've only listened to bits of it, and in the case of Harry Chapin, right, I only heard the flaws. But I hope you enjoy this trip down memory lane, and I will continue to give us a lot more fun and new stuff during this anniversary month. But here you go, the inaugural episode of Set Lusting Bruce. Hello, and welcome to the initial episode of a brand new Bruce Springsteen podcast, Set Lusting Bruce. I have begged, pleaded, bribed to my podcast leader, Rob, to let me do a Bruce Springsteen podcast, and he has kindly finally said yes. And he has even agreed to lead this first podcast, so we kind of talk about what we're doing. Rob, welcome to Set Lusting.
Okay, Jesse, first of all, you didn't have to work that hard.
No, I didn't.
I think it was you recorded it for 80s Reboot, and then all of a sudden I got a note that said, I'm making this a podcast.
So what I did is I joked about, and what you don't know is from the moment, and to give you a little background, Rob had me as a guest on their con show, talking about cons, and just him and Martha are the sweetest people, just the really nice. And I was in Chicago for work, and we didn't get a chance to meet each other, but we've exchanged emails, and he reached out and said, "Hey, we do one Doctor Who podcast that's very family oriented, and it's him and his lovely bride and their daughter, Cuckoo for Who."
Actually, her show, she created it.
And so he said, "I want to do another one, and I think, would you be interested in hosting it?" And I said, "Yes." So we've been doing that a little over a year, and all this time I've been thinking about, I really would just love doing a Bruce podcast, but I don't know. That's a little bit out of our core shows, though. We do games, we do books.
Well, and you know what, Jesse, this is the thing, and this is something a lot of people don't realize about our group, about Southgate Media Group. You see all that geek stuff, you see all that TV stuff, but do you know the whole idea was birthed out of other stuff, and just being creative and finding your voice and feeding your passion. So if your passion is Bruce Springsteen, you know what, we're down with that. Let's do it. Well, so it is in our wheelhouse. It just, you can't tell yet.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good. So that's nice. So, yeah, to give you a little background, Dave, who does the 80s Reboot Overdrive, is kind of a little tired, and he said, I feel like taking a break, but the show's rolling. We've had a lot of great Twitter retweets and a lot of followers, and we're getting a lot of downloads. So I hate to lose the momentum. So he kind of threw it out there. Does anyone have any ideas on shows that I wouldn't have to do a lot of prep work, that maybe someone else would step in and co-host, or host, so we could, I could take a little break. And so I sent him actually a couple suggestions. I sent him Let's Talk 80s books, Stephen King books. And that's because one of my best podcast friends does a Stephen King podcast. And I reached out to Lou, and Lou said, hey, I'd love to talk Stephen King books in the 80s. And that just recently dropped, I think.
Yep, that was either yesterday or today.
Yeah, and so we're also going to do an 80s movies podcast. And then I said, would you be interested in me doing a Springsteen for the 80s? And he said, sure, I can't, I don't really have much to contribute. I said, oh, don't worry about it. So we got Tony from the UK and Colleen from there in Chicago that I had met Colleen on the road. And, we kind of did an hour and a half just going through each of the albums of Bruce in the 80s. And my joke was, this is the pilot episode for my Bruce podcast. And Rob said, no, this sounds fun.
We took it as you said you were joking, and we didn't think you were joking. We're like, oh, okay, so we've got a Bruce Springsteen podcast.
Yes.
And Jesse's doing it, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, so we're excited about it. So this is kind of our initial podcast. Rob's going to interview me, and we're going to talk about my Bruce background and kind of some of my obsessions on Bruce, and we'll go from there. So I turn the mic over to you.
All right, Jesse. I am honored to be sitting in the driver's seat for this episode. I'm gonna just go through some of the questions you would normally ask a guest, and this will be the rare opportunity to hear you tell your stories. So, first of all, what is your Bruce background?
So, wow, what a shocking question. No.
I did see that coming.
Yeah. I was a child of the 70s. I grew up in a family that listened to, quote, the Blues Brothers, both kind of music, country and Western. A lot of Merle Haggard and, Porter Wagner and Mel Tillis and Johnny Cash, of course. And so my mom did love like Fats Domino and Bobby Darin and some of the early, kind of 50s and 60s rock and roll. And so I, did not have a big musical background. And, I listened to top 40 radio like most kids in the 70s. And I heard a lot of Elton John and, Queen and Barry Manilow and all these different things. And went through a spell where I loved Kiss. Believe it or not.
Who didn't?
Yes, and I loved when you got a cold. The coolest thing was when you had that hoarse throat, so you could sound like Peter Criss on Beth.
Right.
Hear you calling, and so and then I discovered the Beach Boys after I graduated from high school in 1977. I discovered Brian Wilson and loved that music. So in around 1980. 81, I was dating the lady who is now my wife, and a friend of hers had gone to school on the East Coast, and she talked about this guy named Bruce Springsteen and how amazing he was. And a different girl I was dating, we were at a Kenny Loggins concert, and they were playing Darkness on the Edge of Town while they were setting up the stage, which is kind of a mix, Kenny Loggins, Kenny Rogers and, Bruce Springsteen, but she fell in love with it. And
wait. I got to stop you there. Did you say Kenny Loggins or Kenny Rogers? Because you said both.
Rogers. Yes, I misspoke. The quick sideline, she loved Kenny Loggins.
Okay.
And so I had this crush on Jill, asked her out, and did the same thing. I said, we're going to go see Kenny Rogers. She goes, Kenny Loggins? I love Kenny Loggins. And I'm like, okay, how can I convince her that Kenny Rogers is just as good as Kenny Loggins? No, so it was Kenny Rogers. And, so I bought The River, and I liked it okay. And then like everyone else in America, born in the USA, I bought and liked all the hits. And kind of bought the live album. And, I was just a casual Bruce fan.
Okay.
Then in 2001, after the towers fell, they did that fundraiser right afterwards.
Right, the tribute show,
yes.
The one to raise funds, sure.
And they opened with the E Street Band doing My City of Ruins.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And so I went and got The Rising, which was the CD, listened to it a little bit, and then even though I lived in Dallas since '86, whenever he had gone by touring, there was always some kind of family obligation, so I didn't get to see him.
Okay.
So in 2002, we got tickets to see him at the Rising tour. And I went, and I will say this often. There are two kinds of people. There are people that see Bruce Springsteen perform live and go, wow, that was a pretty good little show. And then there's people that say, oh my goodness, I need to sell everything I own and get on the road and follow this guy. And I was the second.
Apparently.
Yes, I fell in love with him. And I was so mad at myself because I didn't recognize every song they had done because I had not, wore out the CD. So when Devils and Dust came out, I went to see him, and I knew the songs and I played it. And so I've since then just become more and more obsessed with Bruce. I still love the Beach Boys, but Bruce Springsteen has become my major obsession. In fact, my Twitter bio is not the guy who ran for president, currently obsessed with Bruce Springsteen and Doctor Who.
I think that sums you up pretty well.
Yes, it is.
That is really good, man.
Yes.
So, okay, so that's how you found him. Yes. Also, so what are the times that you've seen him perform? What are some of the highlights? I mean, you saw the one on TV. You just mentioned one concert. How many times have you seen him, and what are some highlights?
So I saw him in 2002, and then when he came back, and The Devils and Dust was a pretty low-key album, and he was touring just by himself.
Okay.
Like smaller venues. And I asked my wife, hey, can I go? And she said, sure, because she had no interest in going. And so, Rob, if you can picture, it's a 2-level theater.
Okay.
And so I was on the first level at the very back, the far wall, as far as from the stage as you can get.
Okay.
To my right was the aisle. To my left was a pillar. So I had a seat that was a solo seat.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes, at the very back.
You were kind of king of the concert, but
yes,
at the very back.
And so a guy came up and said, do you want better seats? And I said, no, I'm fine. You know how the way when you're walking into an arena, the scalpers start, hey, you need tickets. And then he's walking off, and I see he's talking to other people, and all of a sudden it hits me, wait a minute, I'm already in the venue. This isn't a scalper.
Yeah, he's offering you a better seat.
Yeah, so I walk over there and I go, hi, I'm sorry. Yes, I'd love a better seat. He says, okay, here. And so he hands me a seat. So I go and I start walking, and they keep telling me, walk down. And I end up being like 4th row off stage right.
Oh, my God.
5th or 5th row, yeah. So this will mean nothing for Dallas, Texas sports fans, but for those who are from Dallas who understand, my seats were not as good as Moose Johnston, who is now a Fox commentator, but he was a part of the Dallas Cowboys '90 Super Bowl. He played a fullback, and his nickname was Moose, and so you couldn't tell if they were going Bruce or Moose when he came in. But they were better than Babe Laufenberg, who was the backup quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. I was in that middle.
Okay.
And so they were absolutely amazing seats, and it was just him. And so that was pretty special because it was him, several guitars, and a keyboard. And he did a lot of talking between songs, talking about why he wrote this song and what it meant. And
cool.
And so that was really cool. Then I saw him once during the Magic Tour in Dallas. Then I saw him in Houston for the Working on a Dream tour. And I told my wife, I said, I really want to see him more than once during a tour. And if you aren't a Bruce Springsteen fan, you may find that a little weird. But what happens is he does roughly just about a 3-hour show every night when he performs.
Okay. And
about 50 to 60% of it are the same songs. The other 50% are different songs. So every show is different.
Oh, okay.
So, like, I'm a big James Taylor fan, a big fan of Brad Paisley, you know, but their shows are the same thing. They open with the same song. They have the video in the back that are playing things, and that you see this show in Dallas, Texas, and then you see it in Shreveport, Louisiana. It's exactly the same show.
Okay.
Bruce doesn't do that. So Linda said, okay, would you give up Dragon Con to go see more than one concert?
Okay.
This stuff's getting real, right?
Yeah, knowing you, that is pretty serious.
And I said yes. Yes, I will.
Wow.
So we drove. She and I drove together, and this is a great memory. And I'm sure you and Martha will understand when I say this. My wife Linda and I had not gone on a vacation together without another couple or without the kid in years. We may have done a weekend, but I mean a whole week. It'd been forever. We could not remember the last time.
Wow.
And so 2012, we got in the car and we drove up to Kentucky. And that's where my father had been buried in 2011. And we went and saw at the Veterans Cemetery in Radcliffe, Kentucky. We got to see my dad's tombstone and got to visit there.
Nice.
And we went to several bourbon distilleries, and that's where Linda fell in love with bourbon. And I had been training. I had been walking a lot so that I would be able to do the tours, and we had a great time. We drove up and saw some friends in Columbus, and then we drove up to Cleveland. We spent with a friend, Tom Zoller, who does art for us and is a talented artist and writer.
Oh, he's a great guy. We met him at Comic-Con a couple of times.
And just a wonderful guy. And stayed at his house. We saw Bruce in Cleveland, went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame the next day, came back, drove back down to Lexington, saw a couple of more bourbon distilleries, went home. Had the best vacation. We called it our Bourbon and Bruce tour. That was in April 2012.
Okay.
So then, Bruce goes off to Europe, and then he comes back for a fall tour. And the reason we went all the way to Cleveland is he wasn't going for any further west than New Orleans. And the New Orleans Jazz Festival, it sold out too fast for us to get those tickets.
Okay.
So then he came back and he was going to do a Dallas show. No, he was going to do he wasn't doing anything in Texas, but he was going to do Kansas City and a couple others. And so I called Linda at work and I said, "Hey, Linda, Bruce is coming back and he's going to play Louisville. Buy him." So in November of 2012, we drove up. We did more bourbon distilleries. We went and saw him in Louisville. And then I went and saw him in Kansas City like a week later.
Okay.
So that was pretty fun because I got to see him, 3 times in 1 year.
Sure.
And then 2014, 2014, I saw him in Dallas. He did the NCAA double A tournament. That was a free show.
Okay.
He opened. The band came out with Sweet Georgia Brown from the Globetrotters thing.
Yep.
And they had a roadie dressed up as a uniform with a black striped referee uniform.
Fun.
They had a basketball, and him and Niels Laughlin did a jump ball, and they kicked the basketball out to the audience, and they went into a cover of Van Halen's Jump.
Oh, fun.
And that was an amazing show. And then I went to Nashville to see the show. And then my Linda and I both saw him in Houston. And so from April 6th to May 6th, I saw him 3 times in 30 days.
Wow.
So that leads me up to 10 shows. Now, for those of you who knew, that is rookie territory. I mean, there are people, especially from the East Coast, that have seen him hundreds of times.
Oh, my
that
gosh.
have lost count of how often they've seen him.
Wow.
So, so that's kind of a couple of quick stories. That's how many times I've seen him. And it does become an obsession because I just think, there's magic in his music. and in his, in the way it touches me.
Well, and I think that's what this whole podcast is going to be about. I think everybody that you're talking to is going to have stories like that. We have a cousin who
Mm-hmm.
has done the same thing, which we will try to get him as a guest for you.
Good.
And when he first started going, he'd say, "Oh, I'm not a big fan, but I like him, and I went to a show." And then all of a sudden, he was following him on tour, and he had some Canadian friends he kept meeting up with, and he's like, yeah, hanging out with the Canadians, seeing Bruce Springsteen, multiple times a year. It's pretty fun. And I totally get where you're coming from. And I think your listeners will too.
Yeah. And, it's part of it is because each show is different. They love performing. This latest version of the E Street Band, while we certainly miss Danny Frederici, who died of melanoma a few years ago. And then, of course, Clarence Clemens, the saxophone player that is probably as famous as Bruce.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they've got a 4-horn section. They've got 3 or 4 background singers. They had Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine was a guitarist with them this last tour. And, of course, Little Steven from The Sopranos and, playing. And so there's like 12 or 15 people on stage that are just, playing away. And I will tell the listeners, if you want to see, I think, something amazing, a couple of suggestions. If you do a Google search, Springsteen Jolie Blanc. That's JoleBlon. It is a Cajun song that he wanted to record. He ended up not recording it, and he gave it to Gary Bonds. He worked with back in the late 70s.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that's happened over the years is people bring sign requests to the show. And at one point in the show, Bruce will actually go out onto the pit and he will start picking up signs.
Fun.
And then, and they'll look and they go, oh, hadn't played this one in a while. Oh, this is a great song, but I don't know this one. Oh, this is. And so someone requested Jolie Blanc. And he said, very obscure, very obscure. And they talk about it and they play the best version. Susie, who is their, violinist, fiddler, she does a solo, and then one of the keyboardists has an accordion, and they come out, and they had not rehearsed it. This is just them picking up and playing it, and it is amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good tip. Well, and also, I'm going to point one out, even though it's your interview.
No,
we just watched the final episode with Jon Stewart, and Bruce came out, and it was amazing. What a band. Holy cow.
Yeah. And Land of Hope and Dreams, which is the song he did, is absolutely one of my favorite songs. And my son had a little bit of rough patch when he was a freshman in college. And I was driving him back to school. In a lot of ways, he felt, like, oh, what am I going to do? And, and I started playing this song, and, the lyrics talk about, leave behind your sorrows, let this day be your last. Tomorrow there'll be sunshine and all this sorrow past. And, it's a song of redemption and a song of hope. And I thought it was a perfect song. And I think, they cut to the final verse of Born to Run.
Right.
And, how much joy was that? Everyone in the
my gosh,
all the staff out there dancing and singing. And I don't know if you stuck around, but, Jon Stewart's thanking all the bands, and Max, the drummer, gave him the drumsticks.
Yeah, we saw that.
And I'm like, okay, that's a pretty cool souvenir. Here's the drumsticks that they did on my final show.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that he said, here is my moment of zen.
Yes. Yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a couple of different things. I want to know favorite song or album.
Sure.
And I want you to cover what something that meant a great deal to you too. You just mentioned one. Are there other ones that you go, you know what, this album is the album. This song does this for me.
There is, and I certainly love a lot of the albums, and there's certainly songs. I think if you ask any Bruce Springsteen fan, Thunder Road is something absolutely beautiful. And funny story, I had seen him 7 times and never heard him do Thunder Road live.
Oh, wow. You would think that would be a big one.
Yes, and so when the 8th time, when it was at the Dallas show, he played it live and with his wife Patty doing backgrounds, and it was amazing. And then the other thing he did is he either did Thunder Road live as the final song, or he did a song off High Hopes, which is a cover, which is Dream Baby Dream. And I really was like, oh, I love Dream Baby Dream. That would be so cool to see it. And all 3 shows he ended with Thunder Road. So I was like, okay, you can't complain.
Right.
Though I really would have loved to see Dream Baby Dream. So I'll tell you, I won't take too long, but this podcast is going to be about stories. And so I was in the Philippines, in Manila, in January of 2015. And they asked me as a visiting director to do a management talk.
Okay.
And so, what are your core principles? What do you believe? And I kind of talked a little bit about my management philosophy and what I think you need to be successful. And my last point was, I'm going to quote Bruce Springsteen for you. And this is what I said. I said, well, my soul checked out missing as I sat listening to the hours and minutes ticking away. Yeah, just sitting around waiting for my life to begin while it all was just slipping away. I'm tired of waiting for tomorrow to come or that train to come roaring round the bend. I've got a new set of clothes, a pretty red rose, and a woman I can call my friend. That's
nice.
Obviously a love song.
Yeah.
But I think that message is, don't sit there and wait. Enjoy what you're doing now. Too many times people go, well, once I get my business up, then I'll enjoy life.
Right.
Once I get that promotion, then I'll enjoy life. Once my wife and I get through, or my fiance get through these wedding plans, then we can do things. And people don't enjoy the journey, Rob.
Right.
And I think that's the important thing. And so that's been something, I'm currently looking for a new work home, and I play Better Days, and that's the name of the song that I quoted all the time, to say you can't just wait for tomorrow to come or that train to come rolling around the bend. You have to embrace what's happening now.
Right. It's a good reminder to you.
It is a good reminder. And I just think that in a lot of ways, I see that a lot. We're a very busy society, and we're a very competitive society. And I especially see a lot of the young people like rushing. I can't wait for, once I'm out of baseball, I got to get into football or soccer, or, I see a lot of young people when I'm managing a group that, well, if I could get off the phones, I'd be happy.
Right.
And, I say, just enjoy what you're happening now. And so, that comes across a little preachy, but I don't mean it in a bad way. I just want to remind people, hey, guys, there is something out there, and we should, focus on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very nice. And like you said, it's frameworked as a love song, but there are so many messages in there. You can relate it to your life in different ways. So that's a beautiful one, Jesse. Very nice.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the latest songs he did is We Take Care of Our Own, which is actually a sarcastic, kind of like Born in the USA is not a anthem of, patriotic love. But, he talks about wherever this flag is flown, we take care of our own, talking about the things that we haven't done to take care of our citizens. And but I do think that one of the things I embrace is, you know, taking care of our own, doing nice things for people that aren't your friends yet,
Right.
but just so I had to go get some stuff printed today. And I was at one of the UPS stores and I had some stuff printed, and a lady was carrying this huge box that looks like a return to Amazon. And so, I opened the door for her and I said, "Are the rest of these going?" She goes, "Yeah." And so I said, "Okay." So, I went and grabbed, and they were really small boxes. If there had been a bunch of boxes, who knows, Rob? I don't know if
Yeah, right.
I,
You'd only go so far, right?
but I did. I picked them up and brought them in for her, and she goes, "Oh, thank you." And I said, I'm glad to help because that would save you a couple of trips."
Sure.
And I think about that, and I think about, we take care of our own. Wherever this flag is flown, we take care of our own. So that's another thing that I kind of remember.
Very nice.
Yeah,
So, what about ways that Bruce has influenced you? I think you actually just kind of
I
told some,
did.
but you
I
know what?
did share.
Are there other things when you ask that question? Are there specifics that you say, you know what? This is something that I take with me day to day, and it's because of Bruce or something Bruce has said or done.
Yeah. So one of the things that I admire is, he's been, it just was the 40th anniversary of Born to Run. And so he's been playing music. He's in his 60s now. And there's been, I guess, the most controversial thing is, his first wife and him were separated. And so he had one failed marriage. But there has not been a lot of scandal about Bruce. You still get the thing, why is somebody who's a billionaire telling me, that I should stay close to my roots?
Yeah,
But
right.
yeah, but I think that's just you
But he
never lose.
wasn't. He didn't start
Exactly,
there,
exactly. And
and he
so
doesn't act frivolous like he's won.
exactly. So I like that. I like the fact that he he seems to travel in his own pace. And he, in the 80s, he felt like he needed to move forward. So I've heard different stories, but the thought is he fired the E Street Band and gave them all $1 million of severance. I don't know if that's true, but that's the rumor. I've also heard other things that he gave actually parts of their money they earn the residuals for them. So I don't know, but everyone seems to not hate him. And, and kind of did his own music and kind of went his own way. And then, got back the band together. And he seems to, I think the worst insult you can give to someone in the South is, he forgot where he came from.
Right.
And Bruce doesn't seem like he ever forgot where he came from. He taught. I mean, I know he's Darlene Love from the Phil Spector era is putting out a new album this fall, and he helped write the songs on it, and Steven Van Zandt helped produce it.
Very cool.
He appreciates. A quick story. Brian Wilson, my other obsession is touring. He was touring live, and they just had a movie about his life, and
Right.
he was in Jersey, and Springsteen showed up.
Oh, really?
Yes, and so Springsteen was kind of in the back, watching, and so they ended up getting him on stage, getting him a guitar, and so he sang a couple of songs encores, And my wife and my friends said, if you're in that building, you could die happy, couldn't you, Jessica?
Right.
Brian Wilson, Bruce Springsteen together on stage. Forget Chris getting married. Forget grandkids. This is the ultimate of your life. So,
Well, if he had come in on a TARDIS, I think that would have been
absolutely.
the end of you.
Absolutely. Yes, it is. It is so funny. So I admire the man, and I love his work ethic. I love that he seems to, he does a lot. He brings the kids on stage and sings with them, and he just is having fun, playing music. And I think that's amazing that you should be. If you're getting paid to pay music,
You should love it.
You should love it. You should show that joy.
Absolutely.
Well, and that's the complaint that a lot of people have with, sports celebrities or even music celebrities, where it's like
Yeah.
at some point it doesn't seem like they love it. And this guy truly seems like he loves it. Steven Van Zandt, I mean, this guy, he loves it.
Yes.
And I think his whole band is this way, So
Yes.
that is something good point, Jesse. That is true.
Yes. And, there's this, there is a wonderful documentary called Springsteen and I. And we'll probably do an episode where we talk about it in depth. But basically what happened is they put a call out for fans to send in videos of why 3 words that describe Bruce Springsteen to them or tell their Bruce Springsteen stories. And so this filmmaker put it all together and made a documentary. And one of my favorite parts is they show a couple from, and I'm not sure where in Europe, but it's the husband. He's talking to the wife.
Okay.
And the wife is filming, and she says, "What does Springsteen mean to you?" And he says, "Love. Not love of him, not love of his music, love of you.
Oh, wow.
Because I go to all these shows because I love you." And so then they cut back to him after they show things. He goes, "I go to all these beautiful cities where there is fabulous architecture, beautiful museums, and we spend the whole time going to a rock and roll show." And so,
but you are seeing art.
Yes.
So it does count.
Yes. So he says, I love you, so I go to Bruce Springsteen concerts.
Wow.
So that's pretty funny. So then you cut to, there's a bonus part and afterwards on the DVD, and they're showing Bruce, and Bruce is talking about, I saw a rough cut of this documentary, and there was this couple where the guy just doesn't like my music. He says, and I was in a basement cafe or first floor cafe, and I looked out the window and I go, "That's them. That's the guy who doesn't like me." And so he rushes out to get them. And the guy's like, "Oh, no, I love it." And so they bring him in and he talks to him. And so they show a video and he's like, "Do you have any requests?" And he actually said this in the movie. He said, "If you could tell Bruce Springsteen, what would you say? Make it shorter."
That's fantastic.
3 hours. And so they showed after the concert, Bruce said, "I'm sorry, it didn't work for you." And this guy is so embarrassed. He's like, no, it's fine. So that's another reason you just love Bruce, because he gets it.
Yeah, he's very real.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So, Jesse, that brings us to another question.
Yes.
Your wish list.
Yes.
What's your wish list? A few songs that you hope to see him perform live. Something that this would be your set. What would it be?
Yeah. So, one of the things that, if you are a casual fan, you may not understand what we're talking about, but one of the things we're going to do is the name of the show, by the way, to give you set listing, Bruce, is, I don't know if other bands do this, but Bruce fans tweet the set list as it's going. They will go Bruce Dallas and they'll say Badlands. Yeah. And then, they'll send the song. And so as you go, and there are websites that publish the set list after each show, and they will highlight if this was a tour debut. They hadn't played this on the tour yet. Or if it's a sign request. So because he's so diverse, and because there's things, that there's people, and we talked about the signs, so almost all Bruce fans have a kind of in the back of their hand a wish list.
Yeah, the dream list, sure.
Yeah, I'd love to hear this song. I'd love to hear Better Days, which I just quoted if I did. I was lucky enough, and we may put this up on the feed. I put it on my Castle feed, but E Street Radio, which is the Sirius station dedicated to Springsteen, have different people you sign on and you can get chosen. I was picked to do what they call, be the boss.
Oh, fun.
And you get to pick 5 Bruce Springsteen songs, and you talk about them, and you say, and the first song I picked was Linda, Let Me Be the One, because my wife's name is Linda, and she was Let Me Be the One.
Okay.
So
A little on the nose, Jesse.
yes, exactly. By the way, our anniversary is June 2nd, and I post that every June 2nd, and I just think she rolls her eyes because she's not the biggest Springsteen fan. But I'm like, I'm so glad Linda did let me be the one. And yes, it is very much on the things. I'd love to hear some of the stuff from the new album. The Wish is something he doesn't do very often. A quick story: The Wish is about his mom,
Okay.
and he talks about buying him a Japanese guitar at Christmas, and how he said that, and the song is all about all the things that guitar brought them.
Sure.
And and he says, and so I'd love to hear him do that.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't do that a lot. The Promise is something that he doesn't do a lot live. I'd like to see that. Since I'm fairly new to Bruceton, I would almost want, almost anything from the old albums. And The Wish ends with, last night we sat around laughing about all the things that this guitar brought us, and I lay awake thinking about the other things it's brought. And so tonight I'm taking requests here in the kitchen. This one's for you, Ma, but let me come right out and say it. If you're looking for a sad song, I'm not going to play it.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I think that would be fun to see. I did run one in Houston. The song off Tunnel of Love, One Step Up, Two Steps Back. And there was a sign request, and someone said the E Street Band had not played that since probably 87, 88, whenever the album came out, like that tour.
Okay.
And so he played it with Patty doing backgrounds, and the band, they had not rehearsed it, so it was basically just Bruce on the guitar, and Max kind of did a simple beat, and that was pretty cool. So I think that would get most of them. The idea is that I just want to see him a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think your wish list is everything, right?
Absolutely. And you'll hear there are some people that, and they will talk about they're chasing a song. And to get back to our story, when you're tweeting these set lists, people started saying, well, I'm set lusting because I really would have liked to have been there to see this song.
Sure.
Waiting to see. So it kind of seemed perfect for a podcast about the music and the fun.
You know what? It makes perfect sense. I'm going to equate things here a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a Bruce guy. I mean, I appreciate him, but it's not something that I like, oh my gosh, I set lust. But everything you're saying, I'm a big Wilco fan.
Ah, okay.
And I've seen Wilco, I think one time we figured out it was close to 20 times that we'd seen Wilco.
Okay.
Over the years. And it's so similar. There were times that we saw him and they'd only played this song once and everybody was talking about it. I know that was before, when we saw him a lot, it was before tweeting. But now I get tweets that have the set list because it changes constantly.
Yes.
And lots of covers and lots of interesting experiments. And it just, everything you're saying, it just reminds me of that so much.
And I just love the idea that, and I know we're getting close to our time limit, but I'll kind of sum this up for us in a way. The Houston concert, it's over, and it was so good. And my wife was using the restroom. I had already used the restroom, and a lady, probably my age, so in her 50s, had a drink or two, and she's like, "Is it over?" Like, yeah, the show's over. But he didn't do Born in the USA. I see. Yeah, I know he doesn't do that much live, but that's his biggest hit.
Uh-oh.
And and we were laughing, and here's someone that if he doesn't do many songs off Born in the USA, I mean, he either does Glory Days or he does Dancing in the Dark in his encore. He never does both. Well, he very rarely he does both. And it's not that he's ashamed of it. It's just he's got so much other material.
Right.
And I love the fact that he is in his 60s and he's experimenting. He's picking songs out of the thing. He's doing obscure.
Right.
He was in Australia and he did a couple of songs that were from local artists. And the band did a version of Staying Alive that Barry Gibb said brought tears to his eyes.
Wow.
And yeah, that's available on YouTube too. And it is and he didn't do it sarcastically. He didn't do it ironically. They just did it as a full-fledged rock and roll number. And it is amazing with the horns and everything.
Yeah.
So exactly. I mean, this could just as well be, Wishing for Wilco.
I hear another podcast coming.
Yes, indeed. I love that. I love that passion.
Yeah.
And that people are still loving what they do. They're doing it out there. And, it's just something special.
It really is.
Yes.
So, Jesse, how do people reach you?
I am so glad you asked. If you want to be on the podcast and talk about Bruce and all that implies, please send us an email at setlustingbruce@gmail.com. We also are at setlustingbruce on Twitter. We have a Facebook page, Set Lusting Bruce. We already have 3 shows in the can. That is just wonderful. We've had some different guests, and you don't have to have, you didn't have to hitchhike through Europe to see Bruce 15 times. Maybe you've never seen him, but maybe he's gotten you through a tough time, or maybe you just love listening to his music. We'd love to have you on. And that's what the conversation, it's just going to be a conversation between Bruce fans, and we hope people like it, and they hope people find us.
Well, excellent. I know you're going to have an audience. I'm going to listen, and like I said, I'm not a Bruce fan, and I'm like, wow, this was great. It got me thinking about the stuff I am passionate about.
Right.
Wonderful show, Jesse. So,
thank you.
It's your show, so
Yes.
I'm going to step out now. I'm going to let you close it out, but thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to interview you and to talk about this. Well, I'm just really looking forward to this. Martha and I are just so excited for this show. So.
Oh, I am too. So we just want to end with, at the end of every hard-earned day, people find some reason to believe. And that is Bruce's lyrics from Reason to Believe. And so the idea of the show is to remind you that believe in yourself, believe in your passions, and you will go out and have a better day. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.